So we've introduced the helpers for today. Today is on technology. There's 1,000 things we could do today, so we highlighted a few. We're going to spend quite a bit of time today talking about mapping and some of the apps that are available for mapping. So I'm going to go through a brief PowerPoint, and then we'll jump onto some of these apps and just show you some of the computer stuff that you can do online, some of the phone apps that are out there. So the first one I want to talk about, how many people have heard about My Land Plan? Anybody used it much?
I tried it, but I didn't find it, could get enough detail on the maps to actually locate anything on my property.
Okay, we'll talk a bit about that, but My Land Plan is American Forest Foundation, the parent organization of Tree Farm. You can set up a free account. You don't have to be a Tree Farm member to use My Land Plan, and it's got lots of cool features. It's really a pretty comprehensive package that covers lots of things like mapping. You can actually find, if the parcels are available, you can find the parcels and click on those parcels and actually pull them in and create a map based on your parcels. It's also got acreage calculations. When you trace an area on there and click on it, you can actually get data from that. So you can get distances for trails. You can get acreages of areas that you trace on there. So you can create some pretty cool maps. It's got a section where you can track your goals and your activities, which is kind of cool. For me, I don't do very good with record keeping at home because I have to do so much at work that I don't like that part of it. But it's a neat place to journal. You can take pictures and upload them. It's a good place for me if I'm doing an invasive species treatment to just record what I did and put a map out there, draw on there. So lots of cool stuff on there. Still getting problems?
It just kicked me out, isn't it?
Oh, you got booted out. You can do record keeping. There's just tons of good stuff. The cons, and that's I think what your issue is it really can't import GPS data. So you've got to do it visually from what you're seeing. It's got good aerial imagery, good current aerial imagery, but you have to be able to see it to be able to trace it. You can actually put GPS points in, but you've got to do it manually. So you've got to get that GPS point and then physically type it in, and then it'll pop in on the map, which is a pain. But that's the biggest limitation. And then the imagery, you have essentially one choice, whatever's there, it's it. So I also, when I got on, they're in some kind of transition. So I have a feeling they're going to change their platform. So I almost suggest waiting a little bit and then going on there. If you don't have GPS, you're not comfortable with GPS, this can be a nice little tool for you and create some nice maps and stuff. But beyond that, it's got some limitations. But here's an example of my property. And I was able to trace out the boundary as it is on the auditor's website. I was able to create stands, different areas on the property with different types of forest, just visually from what I could see from the image. And then when I click on that, any one of these areas, it'll bring up the acreage of it. I can put notes about that area. I can have descriptions and label them. And there's an example of one of the areas I recently had a Virginia pine cut on. And I was able to trace it out fairly accurately. And again, I can put lots of details in there. So it's kind of a neat tool. I'll stay closer. Sorry. It's kind of a neat tool, but and you can have all these features in there. Points. I put my driveway in there and measure it if you want to know how long it is, how much gravel you need to buy, or if you're buying a fence or whatever it is. Yes, Gary.
Now, did you just trace those from the aerial, or
From the area?
You didn't walk in GPS?
No. The only thing it's not traced from the aerial on here is the property boundary, which when you first get in, you trace the property boundary from the actual boundary that shows up. So you can find your parcel and trace it and get it very accurate. But the rest is just eyeball traced in from the aerial image. There's no good way to pull in GPS data.
Excuse me, but you're in Benton County. I don't think the auditor has digitized plans.
I did some homework on that and was looking for examples, and that parcel data is not on like any of the places I've seen.
Right.
So I don't know really what to tell you, other than it's, just have to check with your auditors and see if you can figure out a way. I checked with Jackson County, and I can actually buy the whole county's data for $100. I can buy my township for $10. So that's another way to get some GPS data or GIS data that you can pull into some of these files. Yes?
Can we get it from the USDA if we're registered?
I don't know the answer to that. Do you, Stephanie? I don't know. We can look into that for you. But that's the issue. I noticed Benton, and I checked a couple other counties. Jackson seems good. Hawking seems good. Gallia, I couldn't get parcels to pop up either. So there's a few counties that they're not readily available online. And I'll show you another place where they're free, where you can see them, but they don't pop up for Benton County. So the other thing I want to just briefly touch on before we go live with these is Google Earth Pro. It's free download. Google Earth Pro is pretty amazing. We think about Google Earth as just like you can do a tour of the Grand Canyon and go see it, but you can actually add your own data in here. And there's different ways you can add data in. You can actually trace it in and save it just like I did on my land plan. And let me get back to this part, just some of the pros. It's free mapping for the desktop. You can import GIS and GPS data. And there's several years worth of data there. So you can look at old black and white images from several years ago. You can pull up the current image. You can go back and forth. Sometimes old black and white imagery is helpful. Sometimes winter imagery is helpful. If you want to find your pine stands in the winter, they pop out just easily. So switching back between those different images can be helpful. Parcel boundaries are difficult to import. If you have them from some way and you can email them to yourself, you can pull them into Google Earth pretty easy. If you don't, there's an end around for most counties. And I'll show you a little bit about that. There's really nothing else there but mapping capabilities, but you can measure distances. You can trace areas on there, get acreages and things like that on Google Earth. And we will go live and just show you a few of those things. This is all stuff that I've gotten onto a map from Google Earth. I have a friend who helped do a management plan for me that actually pulled in what's on the auditor's website, the KLM file. So that's that yellow boundary. I have, I used Avenza, which you're going to see today, to walk a bunch of these other boundaries. So that blue line is where I walk the fence in the boundary. And it's pretty close in most cases, right? So this is something that you got to be careful with parcel boundaries, whether they're on Google Earth or whether on Google Maps, whether on ONX Hunt, no matter where you get them, or even from your county auditor site, they may not be accurate. Most of the time, they probably are, but some of the time they're not. And here's an example where there were some parcels, little parcels down here. There's a railroad track that runs up, and those parcels were separate and didn't get recorded till recently. So until a year or so ago, those parcels, this showed this line coming straight across here, and it showed that I owned that. And I paid taxes on 3 acres more until I went and said, what's going on here? Where's the fence? But this is where the actual fence is and where the property line has been for, that's what they at least treated as a property line forever. So you can do a lot. You've got measuring tools up here. And then you'll notice this timeline. You can pick these different aerial images through there. Is the audio seem to be better now when I'm this close? I think we're just getting too much echoing, so we got to be close. You can put points on there, but this is all Avenza data where I just went and collected data, free app on my phone, and emailed them to myself and pulled them onto Google Earth. So there's a lot of cool stuff there. And then the auditor sites I wanted to mention is if you have an auditor site that keeps their parcel boundaries up to date, you can actually log on to there. You've got a mapping tool. You can measure distances. You can trace boundaries. But there's lots of information on these county auditor sites. How many folks are familiar with them and use them much? So a few of you. You can change your base maps. That's got 2021 aerial photos. I think it's October of last year. So it's very current aerial image as a base to look at. You can click on buttons. If you're zoomed in at the right level, if you're too far out, it won't show up. If you're zoomed in at the right level, you can pick up actually soil maps. You can pick up where the underground mines are. You can pick up flood zones. So there's lots of good information that if you click these boxes, you can actually pick up a lot of good information from the county auditor sites. The parcel boundaries are probably as accurate as they're going to be anywhere. At least you'd like to think they are at the county auditor site. But again, don't assume they're always correct, because I have another example where I bought a recent parcel. It's an old house next door that was abandoned. And the parcel map shows 0.9 acres. And the parcel map shows the property boundary going through the neighbor's roof. So I'm guessing it's not right. I'm guessing the neighbor's probably not happy with that. But we haven't gotten that straightened out yet. And if I draw the line where I think it should be, it's only 0.6 of an acre. So you can't always trust these things. You can't always, use ONX Hunt and go to a boundary and say, this is the boundary. It can help you find evidence of a boundary, and it can get you close, but you can't always guarantee that that's correct. Did I say that well enough, Pat? Is there anything I need to add to that? You can also click on little buttons and it'll give you dimensions, like the length of your boundary on the side. So that could be useful if you actually wanted to measure things. You can find out ownership and tax information. And then I didn't mention, you can click and actually get contour lines as well. So that's kind of handy too. What I like with these county engineers and county auditor sites, one of the things I don't like, it's hard to produce a good map and print it and get it in your hands. But if you go to the county engineer's office in my county, and it may be the auditor, it might be the county engineer in your office, they'll oftentimes print you a nice large scale map. Large scale, small area right here. Did I get that right? There's a large scale map. So they can print you a nice, with those layers, the property lines, the aerial image, the topo lines, the extremes, all that stuff. And that's a handy map to have. Get it laminated, and you can use that as a nice base map. Cons, we've already talked about. Some of the counties just don't have this data available. And I don't really know the answers to those. We should probably ask one of the service foresters in one of those counties how they work around it. The other thing is the way the map is presented on your screen, it's like this. And that shape is hard to get any area visible at one time unless you're zoomed way out. It's just frustrating. And you can't adjust anything on the way you view stuff on these maps. You can't create any features or save them. You can measure distances if you can see them, but you can't trace anything and save it. You just, it is what it is. You can view it, and that's about it. And I think we're going to skip back to the ONX Hunt later, right? So where do we go from here, Stephanie? Google apply. We'll try that. If I can figure out where I am with all these open windows. Where I think I found it this way. So I don't know if you folks can see, I'll have to zoom in. Let's see that area in pink up there. That parcel on the red roof, that's the neighbor's house. And that's the property boundary that the parcels on the engineer sites and on Google Maps and on ONX Hunt and everywhere you have parcel boundaries are right there. So don't always trust those. Especially if there's a neighbor and a shotgun involved, right? I'm not sure why I'm not seeing all these other layers. They are all there now. So all these other layers that you see are things that I created on Avenza, free phone app, emailed them to myself and just popped them in. And they showed up. So it's pretty handy. The other thing I'll mention is, we'll shut those off. That is the boundary from Google Maps. And I'll zoom out a little bit because it's hard. I've got zoomed in too much now.
It's one of the things with property boundaries.
Yes. So I don't know if you remember when I talked about the property, how there was that little chunk down here that was off. But I was actually able to go into Google Maps, and it's probably not worth going into that detail now. But I'll tell you where to get that detail and how to do that. But you can go into Google Maps and zoom in, and you will see property values. They'll show up in everywhere but Benton County and Cayuga County. They'll actually pop in, and you can create a map by clicking on and just tracing those boundaries and pull them right into Google Earth. Once they're created, you save them, it goes to your computer, you click on it, it opens up in Google Earth. And you have a layer, and that's how I got both of those boundaries in there from Google Maps, believe it or not. Why Google doesn't put that feature in Google Earth is beyond me. Maybe it's just because it's the Earth and it can't narrow down to a small area and there's just too much data, I don't know, but it's not available there. Where it is available, and folks in the room might want to write this down, Stephanie, can you put that in chat for me? It's go.osu.edu/DIW map. Go.osu.edu/DIW map. And we did a presentation about 2 years ago. At the end of one of the presentations, I go into the detail of how to do that. It's actually got a slide that shows you that. Essentially, you got to go in there, hit your places, I believe it is, create a map, and it'll actually have a little draw icon where you can click on it and draw around your property and pull it right into the map, which is pretty amazing. For those of you in the room, after lunch, if anybody wants to learn how to do that, I'll demo that. I'll show you how I did that. So we can do that. Now they can't hear me because I turned away. That thing is not working as well as it normally does, so I apologize for that. Yeah, I think it is. So now, do we want to take time for my land plan now, Stephanie, or do we want to do something different? The problem with my land plan is I got to figure out how to log in. Okay, we'll try to do our best. Sorry out there, folks. Well, probably should. Now I got too many things in the way. No, DIW, I think. Okay, I am actually logged into my land plan, and for you in the room, I apologize. I'm going to turn my back to you because we've been neglecting our folks out in the real world here. So when you get on there, this is what it looks like, and you can add a property. And I'm just going to go real quick here. Somebody want to put their property on there? How do we want to do this? You got an idea of an address we can put in, Pat?
8570.
Pat. 8570.
State Route 73. Waynesville, Ohio. Four 45068. That's where my office is. Use my address, but I don't have.
See, you type in the address, that property comes in, and it's got a lot of help features that drive you crazy at times. You just gotta close them. And then you hit add a new boundary. And go to map. I'm sorry. You just get as close as you can, and then you can you can float around. So we can try that when we're not online.
All of the rural ones are 0 total road.
But if you look here, the parcels are all showing. And then you can add a new boundary. And I should be able to just click on, work my way around that boundary, and it'll start. It's very faint. You might not be able to see it from where you're sitting. Once I get around it, it'll put a boundary in. And then that's the new property. So it's pretty well that simple, and it's not that hard to trace those lines, especially if they're rectangular and stuff. And then let's see, let's go back to here, and I'll just show you my prop. Well, we'll go to my prop. And there's just tons of features, folks. There's just tons of features. You go to map features and click on it, and if it's gonna work, there it is. Map, there's the map boundary. There's all the map features. I can turn them on and off with these clicks. And they start disappearing. So there's just tons. And then if you click on one of those features, it actually tells you how many acres and the info is in. So it takes some getting used to, but you can create some really cool maps that will help you with your property. And then there's all these other tools, the task list, the journal. If you're out there in your woods and taking pictures and you just want to remember them, put them in there and take some notes, you can do that. I used it on my property when I was treating stiltgrass. I would GPS them, put the dates that I treated and how I treated them, just so I knew one place. It wasn't on a sticky note that I could find. It was always in that spot. So with that, that's probably enough of my land plan for now.
So just for the record, we are recording this, so if you guys want to go back and view this too in person, you can get it on the website and see our presentation.
And actually, the 2 year ago stuff is in a lot more detail in each of these programs. So there is an older recording at that site I gave you, that go.osu.edu/DIW map. There's a pretty, like a 15-minute recording just on my land plan. And there's a 15-minute recording just on Google Earth. So we go into a lot more detail there. Yes, Susie, I think.
Yeah, so this is a free program, right?
It is free.
Is there one that's like this that you can purchase and you can keep the information all to yourself? Do you know if you right now?
I don't know. Do you know of a good land management type? This one, as far as I know, I've never had anybody contact me about this data. I don't know who can actually see it other than someone probably in the tree farm system probably could, but I've never had any issues with it. I don't think it's a real concern.
Question in the chat of, are there privacy settings?
I don't know of any. So the only thing I get from the tree farm system is an email once in a while saying you haven't been on my land in a while. So that's a good question, and we can look into that a little bit too. With that, what's next, Stephanie?
That's all I said.
But you're up. It might be easier to stay right there and let you do it from wherever, but you can do it from up here if you want. Just type in the search window up at the top and it should